feels good to be back in the stand. Took some time here on the home farm and finishing up the improvements that we started this last winter, I guess we did, and on the home farm here that is for sale. And just finished my water hole today, moving the water hole, getting it tied in to the improvements with all the work that we did down below on the food plot, and then enhancing that transition area through that bedding area, and then around the top of the ridge here, like I showed you in the past. As I was up here, I was thinking of sitting in the stand, making sure it was locked in, getting myself locked in, and taking the squeak out, and just kind of going over different things that were in the stand that I need to cut down here in a minute. And one of the things that I wanted to touch base on is, if you follow along with the video at all, you'll see, it won't take you long to see that I'm a big transition area promoter, whether that's out in a switchfield or switchgrass field, or enhancing those interior woodlot transition areas that are ever so important. Huge step that often gets overlooked. Sometimes doesn't get maybe the intentions there, and even after the design is done, when the folks do these themselves, you have to really kind of tie all the pieces to the puzzle together. And end of June here, staring down the barrel of July, perfect time to get in the stand and create these. Now this stand, everything is created up until this point. Last year, because we moved the food, enhanced the food down below on the other side of the ridge, so now we've got food. We've got the does backed up on the south side of that plot, and the ridge system comes right through, and we're able to access from down below up into the stand. And the reason that I moved the water hole is because last year I was taking that transition area all the way to the end of the ridge, trying to get as close to the morning travel coming back across from the ag field back interior of the farm, headed back to that bedding area that was further away. So now it's closer and on the north end, and now I need to move it closer on the south end to take advantage of how it fits in. But how do you go about finishing the puzzle, the pieces to the puzzle? One of the things today we'll talk about is what I do if I'm involved in the stand placement on these farms. After designing it, I always make sure the tree is ribboned off, so they know, the clients know this is the tree. And if we're dealing with limited trees, sometimes obviously they know that's the tree, but I always like to ribbon it off. And we talk about the direction of the stand, which way the stand is facing. I always ask my clients, are you left-handed, right-handed? All that ties into this, because this situation, as you can see right here, I just finished. I'm not even sure if you can see it. It's right in that where the light's coming through. There is the new water hole, which is right in there, I think. And shooting lanes aren't trimmed to it yet. The licking branch is there. We've had the camera running on that licking branch now for 3-4 weeks. And but that case right there, it's down on the ridge to my left. I'm a right-handed shooter sitting in the stand. I can either stand and shoot in this out of this stand. I can sit and shoot. Either way, that's kind of I find that that's a 50-50 preference. I myself, if I can sit, I will. If I have to stand, I will as well. So I don't ever tell folks that they have to sit. If you stand, you're going to blow your odds. You have to be more stealthy. But there's situations in different stands when you hang, like I used to hang 250 tree stands a year. You learn real quick that some of them you have to stand, some of them you have to, you can get away with sitting and shooting. So with that tied in, always remember when you're bringing these transition areas up, guys, number one thing, just went over this with a client in Clare County, Michigan here this week, is get in the stand, place the stand while you're doing the habitat improvements after the evening, after doing some stuff, before you get that transition area completed. take a minute, get in the stand, have like now I'm having this, you know, sweaty old white shirt on today, but we use the kind of the neon stuff when, you know, I'm hanging these for clients, so I can see, you know, the folks on the ground and see exactly where, because this time of the year it's dense, you know, unless you're in a spot where it's just you know, the timber TSI just went through, it's going to be thick because of the leaves. So we get in a stand and I bring those transition areas up. And they don't always work this way. Obviously this is a ridge system, so I've got ag behind me a 1/4 mile. The reason I've got the stand here is because I can look over my left shoulder and the deer have to come down the ridge here into the bottom of this valley and then back up to me right through this area right here. They come down in the morning, they transition back from the ag down the hill through a low spot in the fence, and it's a valley. Comes right back up, crosses the water tank and the licking branch as they travel over top of the ridge. So they're only exposed to danger and to me as a hunter for about a 100-yard increment, but that is divided by contour. So the reason I say that, some spots I like to do is if you can, especially in rifle blind sets, if it's going to be a box blind or anything like that, I like to put these on the corner of these transition areas. Long linear food plots, you keep a gap in them corners, put those blinds or stands in those if you're going to gun hunt, which I do out of my tree stands, but put them in those corners. And what I'm saying is those transition areas then become shooting lanes to that for some purpose, not a far shooting lane, but with a rifle you could reach out and touch something, or a shotgun you could reach out and touch something coming down that, if you know, holds up, crosses the transition area before he gets into range. If you set up on the corner of them, you have a 45 degree, you're in the center of a 45 degree or a 90 degree. Sometimes it ends up being a 90 degree angle where you're at the pinch of the point of that angle, and you can see, let's say you can see north and you can see to the east. Very powerful setup, doesn't happen all the time. I like to try to design them that way if I can find them. This one here, because the reason I have this set here is in the evening so this is a very powerful morning set, but in this location, because of the way I can access it and the contour, I can hunt this morning and evening. Now I have to hunt that obviously on different winds. In the mornings it's an east wind, a southeast wind, or a south wind in the mornings. East wind coming back off the ag fields to go right past me. And something to keep in mind with these transition area guys is always try to be off eyesight, is what, you know, I like to refer to it as. Is if I were to in an evening set, let's say, when the deer are coming back out of the bedding area, heading the deer that do transition out to the ag field, when they come up this bank, they are looking kind of, when they quarter skirt that top of that ridge coming up through here, as they work past me, they are facing here. They are actually facing to the east, kind of southeast-ish, and I'm off that angle. So it's not a come up the top of the ridge and you're right in their eye, or when they go down the ridge, they have a chance to pick you off. I'd like to set off the side of those eyesight, eye travel, you know, in the line of eyesight there. So with that said, the transition areas, the biggest thing that I want to chat with is when you're in the stands, you have somebody on the ground, you're in the stand. I like to use the 100-yard mark as the cutoff, but small parcels and contour tie into that, so I'm not going to tell you that it has to be 100 yards. Do not hinge cut anything too close to your stand locations for a transition area. If you're going to make the transition area, make it with edge. I'm a big believer in getting rid of the trees. If you cut them down, if you have a canopy issue where you don't have a line and you're trying to promote that transition area in the timber setting, cut those trees out. Go through, what I do is I take a paint can or a ribbon and I go through the center where I want that transition area. those transition areas outside of the corridors, of the bedding areas, the transition areas are 10 feet or 10 yards, 30 feet wide. And the reason I go 30 feet wide is because if you go any narrower, the leaves this time of the year choke off that area and it doesn't regenerate. What you're trying to create is you're trying to create a line, an edge for them to follow in that transition area. Sometimes they'll browse the center of it, sometimes they'll use the edge. The thicker it gets, they will use that in the interior until it gets too thick, and then they'll start using the one side or the other. So what I like to do, any debris that you take, put the debris on the far side, not your side of not the stand side of the transition area, put it on the other side. And the reason is if when it grows up and it gets thick, the edge will be more natural on your side than it will the brush side. But I like to scatter that brush. I do what we call lop. You take a saw through that every 2 feet, and so when it snows, it smashes, because in those areas you do not want any hinge cutting. Hinge cutting is to promote bedding and side cover and to put that regrowth at head height for the deer. If you get them too close to your stands in a transition area, you're going to get busted because the deer are going to bed in it. So take those center lines, and like I said, if it's 100 yards in from your hinge cutting, if you have a long transition area between bedding and feed, if you're in that transition area and it's a longer transition, you can hinge cut to try to promote that line of travel out of the corridors, but don't hinge cut in those transition areas within eyesight or ear sight of your stand. Not our ear sight, their ear sight. So if the stand's gonna crack and pop and bang when you're trying to hunt in it in the evening, you're gonna blow the set. So keep that in mind. Hinge cutting is a powerful tool. Keep it in the bedding areas, just outside of the bedding areas in the transition area to start that funnel. Then open that up, create your center line past your stands. Make that 10 yards, 30 feet wide, so the daylight can hit the forest floor, so that regenerates. Now you've created an edge. Any of that debris goes on the outside, so you have a natural edge to the inside. A couple tips there, guys, that I think will help you. I don't know the exact number, but I would say it's more than half of the transition areas that the farms that have transition areas that were created by other folks in the industry, the habitat managers, I'll say, put those right past the stand. And time again, folks are getting busted. They can't get in and out of their stands. They're wondering why they're getting busted. They're wondering if it's a wind issue. And 50%, 75% of the time I can cure that by cleaning that debris out of those areas and making that transition area your bypass. It's not your holding point. The transition area is exactly what it means. You're transitioning deer from bedding to feeding. You're not bedding deer in a transition area. So draw a center line outside of those corridors, make it go past right through your scrape or your water hole, continue on past you. Make sure the stand's on that downwind side. Make sure that the licking branch is set up. If you're a right-handed shooter, make sure it's set up on the left quarter of the stand so you can shoot sitting down or standing. And make sure that these transition areas are not hinge cut too close to the bedding or too close to the stand locations, because the deer will bed in there, and you stand a chance of getting busted getting in and out of the stand, and then that totally blows all your improvement. So I'll show you a couple of the designs here. There is spots that I get into, especially on small parcels. Even larger the parcel, the more I find them, or can do it. There are areas where you can use the contour and hinge cut in transition areas, but not your point of impact, not at the point of impact in those transition areas. Do not hinge cut those trees in there. Cut them out. Like I said, create that center line, go 15 feet each side of that center line, cut it out, get it all out of there. By doing that, guys, you can maintain that transition area. People often ask, what do I do with the transition area after X amount of time? These trees are getting too big, and they're over the size of what I say silver dollar trees, and deer aren't eating them, and they get these thick, but it doesn't have the power that it used to. The reason that you have all your old growth out of there is because then you go back in after your trees in that transition area or over silver dollar size, you can cut them out and start that regeneration again. But get rid of the tall growth that's above their head that's not doing anything as far as browse. Cut it out, and depending on the soil, depending on the area, that could be every 5 years, and you're just promoting that edge, continuously promoting that edge. So cedar swamps, hardwoods, out in switchgrass pockets, it's all the same theory. You're just dealing with a little bit different components in each one of those. But don't hinge cut too close to the point of impact in a transition area. Make sure those transition areas are clean, they're thick, they're the right density. Go past, hang those licking branches and those water holes in there, and I think that'll help you in the future. If you've got one of those that's in question, if you're listening to this video and you're like, maybe that's the problem, get it taken care of now, and you'll be ready for fall. Thanks, guys.